Hey folks, it's Bear Gardner, and we are here with another edition of Cards Special Operations Executive, and it is time for the rotation for the newly announced winter expansion Homefront, and because this rotation is a little impactful in places, I thought I might grab some people whose faces you might recognize, lock them in the Cards SOE bunker until such time as we're done recording, and force them to give your opinions. And as it turns out, I'm lucky enough to know some fairly smart people. So, sitting down below on the screen beneath the shiny Homefront thing, we have Core. Core, why don't you give yourself a quick introduction to all of the folks watching?
Hey guys, I'm CoreData. As some of you may know, I make some content related to cards, occasionally doing deck techs and gameplay videos, as well as occasionally streaming over on Twitch. I'm relatively new in comparison to my two co-hosts here. Only been playing for what 7-ish months, but I like to think I have a relatively good understanding of the game. So hopefully I can give some insights. But I I don't know if I'm the most qualified person in this call.
That's okay, because on the subject of qualified people, I've also managed to grab JKing7. JKing, why don't you tell people who you are if they don't already know?
All right, I'm JKing7. I also do cards, YouTube, and occasionally Twitch. And I mainly focus on the competitive aspect of the game. So this is talking about decks and the best deck in the game and how to play them well, as well as covering news that particularly affects people who play the game a lot. So news about balance, news about rotation, and news about tournaments and whatnot. And I've been playing the game for 6.5 years, so I've been around the block here.
Which is interesting, because that means in the 6.5 years that you've done it, you've won exactly 50% of the World Championships, which you will never say yourself because you're far too humble. But JKing is indeed the threepeat Cards World Champion, and generally accepted by most top players to be one of, if not the best player that we have seen in the game. I'll say it because he's far too nice to do so. Guys, I am super, super grateful for you coming along and being part of this. It's going to make my life a little bit easier. In the interests of not taking too much of the poor human beings watching this time, I say too much because if you guys know us, we can all talk. If you check out the links down below, there are links to everyone's channels. Please go follow, like, and interact with everyone involved in this. I cannot stress enough at the moment how much the YouTube algorithm is being an absolute arse. And the more that you interact, the more that you engage with it, the more chance you're giving channels in a relatively small and niche world being made by passionate people a chance to actually grow. And it's kind of key at the moment because they've had a fiddle with the algorithms and it really does feed off interaction. So make sure you go and like these guys, catch them, and obviously get on board if they're ever streaming. They're always worth a one. Plus, if one of us is streaming, one or other of the rest of us is probably there because we sort of end up lurking in this weird Ouroboros circle of each other's content. Okay, so time for the US of A, our last main nation. Oh, last not least, something, 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 America. Let's start, as ever, with moving from the reserve pool, so returning cards, and we start with a standard card. This is the 17th Infantry Regiment. So, 17th Infantry Regiment is a 2-cost, 1-op cost, 2/2 kind of vanilla infantry that has deployment. Give another friendly unit +1/+1. My big piece on this is I have constantly, continuously in the past recommended new players to craft and use this. This has been in so many new player friendly, super cheap pauper-esque decks that I've come up with, just because it's decent. It's 2/2, it gives a decent deployment effect, it's got acceptable operation cost for a decent body, it's good on rate. Does that mean that I think it's just going to come back as is? I don't know. Maybe it might see a little bit of a buff or a tweak or something, but honestly, I think you can just bring it back as is and it will still be a functional and usable card because it doesn't really have, it doesn't ask a lot of you. Let's start with JKing. Thoughts on the return of the 17th?
Oh, I think it's a fine card. It's not going to see any competitive play, but unlike Spitfire, it has text on it. So that's fine. I was looking through the other cards that could have come back, and basically there's nothing I think that would be particularly more impactful than this. There's cards that would be maybe more impactful at lower ranks, like California could have come back, but I see why they're not doing that. The only other thought I had was the F4 F3 Wildcat, the completely vanilla Wildcat, which I don't know why they didn't bring that back and rework it into the current Wildcat that is in standard. That one made more sense. You didn't even have to do a stat change, and it's the same rarity. And then you get to keep the other Wildcat effect, which I thought was much more interesting of an effect. But I don't know, you could have brought that one back and reworked it. But if you didn't want to rework something, then 17th Infantry is a fine choice.
Core, thoughts on the little 17th baby boy?
No real thoughts on this. Again, it's like a new player card. I never really played with it. When I started playing, the deck I ended up building immediately was US Ramp. So I didn't go the typical new player route. I just immediately built Brit US Ramp and hit Field Marshal in 3 days. So I didn't get the typical new player experience. So I never really had to play with this card. So I mean, it's nice it's coming back. It gives like low rank infantry kind of decks something to do on too. God knows they're going to need it given some of the cards that US are losing out of rotation. So
yeah, we're going to get to that. I will say, don't feel so bad. It turns out that those of us who end up in like content creating, casting, all that bits and pieces, have a tendency to not have had the standard new player experience. Piece of trivia, I first hit Field Marshal on an HMS Hermes-centric deck designed by the guy just below me on screen with a couple of modifications of my own. So I also did not have the typical new player experience. I built a very specific deck and accelerated to Field Marshal quite quickly. But yeah, it's a bit of fun.
Actually, yep. Just on the things that like could have come back, there is a couple of like interesting standards that they could have brought back. I don't know if it would have been any good or if historically it has been any good, but the SB2C Helldiver is something that like interests me as a card. just the 2/2 bomber that every time you ramp it, you get an extra copy of it. That to me that's interesting, especially with like strike group in the format. So just wanted to point that out.
The Helldivers came out and I didn't look at it, and then one day like 2.5 years later, I was like, you know what? I'm feeling like cooking Helldivers. Let's build a big ramp deck, do some crazy Helldiver stuff. And then I realized it had to be on the board to proc. I thought it procced from your hand. Yeah, no, it is unplayable trash, and I don't know why it's too wild. It could have come back and like been buffed to like 1-up, and then like maybe you can play it, but yeah.
Yeah, it would have needed a little bit of help, but I had a feeling JKing might have something to say. Right, here's another recognizable card. This is the US returning elite. This is the C-47 Skytrain, which is famous for a number of reasons. It is a 3-cost, 2-op cost, 0-4 fighter. Yes, I know, at me, at 1939, carry on, it's a transport, it should be a bomber, yada, yada, yada. It's a fighter in-game, such is life. I've had so many discussions about that, it hurts. And it has the text, at the end of your turn, add a random 1-cost US infantry to your support line. There definitely have been times when this card has seen a shit ton of play in US Frontline, because there have been times when there have been cards in the US 1-drop pool that you really, really wanted to see, and when this thing dropped them, it could be insane. I think I'm going to get Core's thoughts on the return of it, and then I think there's going to be some bouncing around as we talk about the 1-op the one drop pool and how it fits in and how that affects it. But Core, again, as someone who didn't have the classic new player experience, how do you feel about the return of the Skytrain?
I find this card very hard to get a beat on because it's an effect that I don't really have any experience with in other card games. Like there's a few things that do similar things to this in other card games, but like they're very difficult to gauge on because it depends on the pool. And I'll spoil. US is losing one of its best one drops, if not its best one drop period. It is getting a pretty solid one drop back. If you look at the pool, you're gonna have like 8 one drops in the format, 3 of which have blitz, 2 of them are 1/3s and one's a 3/2 with shock. You have the potential of generating a 109th combat engineers. You have the potential of generating a 10th engineers battalion, and then you have like a couple of basically vanillas in the Deuce, 506th Airborne, and the Choco Boys. So like you have at least like a 50% hit ratio on like decent one drops, but I don't know if that's enough given like how fast a lot of the aggro decks are in the format, right? And it's like even if it does spawn the blitzers, you're not able to take advantage of them because it's at the end of the turn. So even if you do get like the airborne, the 3/2 shock guy, you still can't like immediately do anything with it. So I don't know. For me, this is very, very difficult to like rate with any sense, like any semblance of confidence. So I don't know. For me, this one is very up in the air.
JKing.
Skytrain is. I'll quickly start since I'm the history guy. Skytrain was released as the single worst card ever printed in this game. Skytrain on release was a 5-cost 0/6 bomber, which is really funny. It got released as a bomber, and they retroactively changed it to a fighter to make it have a more use case. And it had the text "cannot attack," so you can't even buff it. And then it had the following text, which was, at the end of your turn, like your leftover credits get added to your next turn. So like if you played this 5-cost 0/6 bomber can't attack and then floated 5 credits, you'd get 5 more credits on the following turn. Yeah.
I will say that exact effect, like the mana carryover effect, we had that in Legends, but it was on a 4-cost like 3/7 that if you passed like if you started your turn with I think it was like 20 or more mana, it just turned into a 30/30 that killed your opponent. So so there was like that effect is not inherently bad, but on a 0/6 that does nothing, it is terrible, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the Skytrain in its current version, when it got changed to its current version, it was incredibly good and it was run in Frontline, which was a tier 1 deck. And then they released Red Devils, which we'll talk about soon, which is the best one drop the US has ever gotten, completely busted, and Skytrain could sometimes get it, which made Skytrain even better. And then they eventually rotated Red Devils and introduced the Deuce. And then suddenly Skytrain became substantially worse. And it took a bit for a lot of people to sort of, realize that, hey, this card's not as good as it used to be anymore. And people started eventually cutting it, and then they rotated it, and now it's coming back. But it's coming back with the Deuce rotating, and Jasko's already out of the pool, and that was the other big hit that would just ruin your day if you had a Jasko. So there's no bad pulls anymore. The great pulls are slightly reduced. I think the average card you get is maybe the average good card you get is slightly worse than before, but the average card you get is much better than before because you're not hitting Jaskos 1 in every 10 Skytrains. That being said, Skytrain, there's suppress around. If it gets suppressed, I don't think it's the end of the world if it gets suppressed. It's a fighter that, you do some ways to buff it. So all in all, I think if you're playing Frontline, I think you will play Skytrain. I don't think Skytrain is going to move the needle on Frontline.
No, tend to agree, especially as someone who played a shit ton of Frontline over the years and has built many, many new player Frontline friendly decks. Yeah, it'll probably see play. I do think, it is important to note that I think the point at which everyone finally began to realise that Skytrain had its day was when you were regularly seeing people going, My support line consists of a Skytrain, 2 Jasko, and a Deuce. Ow.
There's one of my favorite clips in Cards Esports ever was in Game 5 of a third place match. TB was, I think, in a fairly favorable matchup, and he played a Skytrain down on turn 3 or turn 4 in just like a completely normal game, like Frontline versus like Soviet Control or something like that. And the Skytrain pulled 3 consecutive Jaska. He just completely lost. And this was back when like Red Devils was in the pool, so I think Jaska was 1 in 11.
Yeah.
But he just, RNG just decided to absolutely ruin TV's day.
Yeah, I mean, another fun fact about Skytrain is there have been multiple conspiracy theories, big questions about how it's somehow the programming in the back of it is highly swung one needle to the other and the whole thing. Here's the thing, kids. Random is random, and just because in a million things you'll see each thing X number of times doesn't mean you won't see it 60 times in a row. Statistical clumping is a thing. It is just random, and random can be dangerous. But yeah, I think we can safely move on, because we will talk about Skytrain sort of in passing again in a bit. But first, we have the return of another one of my favourite cards. I have had so much fun with this card over the years. This is the M16 Halftrack. So this is the returning US limited card. This is a 3-cost, 1-op cost, 2/2 tank. And it just says, deployment, an enemy air or infantry unit must retreat. I legitimately, when I first started getting good at this game, have lost count of the number of games that this has won for me by removing something that might kill me or getting the guard out of the way for my front line to be able to finish out the game. In its time, this has been a venerable machine that has any retreat effect. It's not as good as bounce, but it can be good, and this is a limited card. Is it good enough now? I don't know, but I have fond memories of this card. Core, I think this was, as you say, one, you didn't have the new player experience, but this was kind of before your time as well, right?
It was, yeah. This was gone well before I started playing, I'm pretty sure. It's an interesting card. Obviously, like, cheap retreat, cheap disruption like this is always going to be pretty solid, but the problem it faces is that the 3 drop slot in US is the most competitive slot in the entire deck. Every good US card costs 3 credits. Like, when you look at what it's competing against 175th, the 3-cost 6/6 Blitzer. It's competing against Pathfinders, competing against Air Cover, competing against Calliope, Goose, M10, M18 Hellcat, Coronado, Seahawk, Military Research, Strike Group.
Yeah.
Like, it's the slot in the deck that, like, yeah, I don't know if it's going to be good enough. I can see there being a world where, like, there's a hyper aggressive deck that maybe wants it. I can maybe see a world that you maybe slot it into Brewsters, like, because in aggro matchups you want the front line. So if your opponent pushes a comb or whatever and you're aggressively finding the front line, you can maybe half track to try and get an air cover down. But it's just I just don't know if it's fast enough.
No, it's fair. I mean, I do have to say, I kind of would like to see maybe a little bit of a buff when it comes back in, or a little bit of help, or some kind of a rework if it is going to compete, or find a way to change it so that, like you say, it doesn't fit the 3-cost, because that is the killer. Like, the US decks that are like, can I just have 4 3-credit turns somehow, please? Because I've got so many cards. JKing, I know you too have seen plenty of this card in your time.
Yeah, Halftrack. I don't know if this is still the case, especially not since it's been in rotation, so you definitely don't have any experience with this core. But for a long time, I think it was a rite of passage to play cards where you played Halftrack and then lost the game because you realized it can't retreat a tank.
Yep. No,
I
truism.
I think every person I've talked to who has played cards, who got into cards while Halftrack was in the game, has experienced that moment. Um, Halftrack really started to drop off a bit before it got rotated because the meta just moved towards everything being a tank. Like the best guards were all tanks, the best like just threats were tanks. Everything was a tank, and then M10 came out, and then everyone was like, "Well, why would I run half?" Which can't even retreat anything half the time when I can just run M10, which is bigger and also suppresses tanks. Now in the last like 2 expansions, we've really gone really far back to infantry and now fighters in particular, with air supremacy. So like I think this is just a prime meta for Halftrack to make a big comeback. Just thinking about it now, I think I'd rather have Halftrack over M10 in a traditional frontline, which was definitely not the case in covert operations, the meta right before covert operations, which I believe is when Halftrack got rotated out. And the other thing I want to say is with Halftrack and the next card we're going to be talking about, I would just like quickly looking at my collection, and I think the entire gang is back together now. I think you can actually build like tier 1 best deck in the game meta frontline from like 3 years ago. In standard again. I think they've really brought back every single card except for 99th Infantry. But you can just play For Freedom in it now, because For Freedom's been buffed since that deck was good. So yeah, I'm not saying that that deck on its own, without any new cards, is the best way to build Frontline. But you better believe I'm going to be jamming Frontline, because I set my 56 game win streak on US Frontline, and now the gang is back together, and I'm very excited to play with it.
Can confirm, have the list written in a corner. It is the case. The boys are back in town, and you are right. 99th is the missing one. But yeah, we will get classic. I certainly will be playing some classic frontline just for the nostalgia. But let's hop on to the next card because it is relevant in the classic frontline discussion. Just a little bit. Right, this is Red Devils. Red Devils is a polarizing card. Red Devils is a 1-cost, 1-op cost, 1/3 blitz infantry. It is a special card, and it says it costs the enemy +1 credits to target or attack this unit. There are people who love this card because it made their deck just so much better. There are people that hate the existence of this card because it made Frontline so much better. I think most everybody that I know has an opinion one way or the other on Red Devils. I personally love this card because it makes you think. Now, I'm not going to talk about it as is now. We'll get to that in a minute. But historically, this is one of those cards that I think was an excellent education tool for a new player in the game because it taught you to read the card before doing something. Because the number of times I've watched the little animation as my opponent is looking at a card, as you can see them slowly realizing that the reason their turn didn't play out the way they had it planned is they forgot that this costs an extra credit. We have got other cards that do similar things. So we have got like Sturmy at the moment, I think will probably be Core's closest experience.
Yeah.
So let's see what Core's got to say with thoughts on Red Devils.
Yeah, so obviously Red Devils, even I'm able to tell that this is like a ridiculously powerful 1-drop. 1/3 Blitz is already very good. I have been vocal that Alabama just as a body was very, very good. I think when it was revealed, when I first talked about Alabama, I talked about how good it was just as a 1-drop, being a 1/3 blitzer. The fact that this taxes your opponent for trying to even attack it in aggro mirror matches is pretty huge. But I am gonna pump the brakes and not get too excited because, first of all, 1/64th Infantry is leaving the format, and I think that would have been like this card's best friend. Because you just turn 1/64th, take the front line, turn 2, Red Devils blitz it forward, and your opponent then has to answer the Red Devils in the front line, which they can't really do all that easily. But with the loss of 1/64th, I don't know if Red Devils is going to be fast enough versus decks such as Soviet aggro and Japan aggro, when they can just play a comb and very, very easily take the frontline control, like within the first turn. Because Red Devils is all well and good when your opponent can't really target it, but the comb is going to sit in the front line and they're just going to play rush on it and kill the Red Devils regardless of what you do anyway. So I don't know, given how fast a lot of the aggro tools have gotten, whether or not Red Devils is going to be that good. Now, again, I will openly say this card reads really, really, really powerful. Again, my closest comparison point is Sturmy, and I love Sturmy. I think Sturmy is a phenomenal 3-drop in tank decks. I think it's underplayed in mid-range in general. I think if you're playing Finland, Sturmy is a solid shout. I know the 3/3 Blitz Shock Infantry is like a little bit a higher play rate because it cycles a card, whatever. But Sturmy versus like slower decks is so disruptive, and versus aggro, it's even more disruptive if it gets into the front line. And this shares the exact same thing with Sturmy, barring it doesn't have shock, so it can't freely take a trade or whatnot. But it comes out a lot earlier. It's just, given the speed of the game currently and given how aggressive some of the bodies are, like out of, again, specifically Comb, for example, I just don't know if Red Devils is going to be as good as it used to be.
I will, in response to all of that analysis based on changes in the game and based on the most popular cards in the meta, I will counter that with pure nostalgia. Red Devils was the best card in the game when it left. It's the best card in the game that's coming back, and we are going to be riding the US-German frontline train all the way to rank 1.
It's unfortunately, you are just up against the wall of the two old war horses who cannot stop talking about that one deck.
No, I think Red Devils is a card that I legitimately pushed to have Blitz removed from it for a very long time. And I'm assuming it's coming back without change, because obviously the game has been power crept to the point where it's not like noticeably better than Colm or anything. Although Colm might need to be tuned down, but that's another conversation. I think Red Devils on its own, if you go second, is not particularly useful into Japan. One nice thing is that they don't get to easily value trade with just like type 93, and then their 2 attack thing becomes 3 attack. However, you're probably playing it in a deck with the Chocolate Boys, the 32nd Infantry, and that card is just so good against Japan. Even if the trades don't line up, even if you're spending more credits than they are because you have to operate with things, just the fact that you get all of them for free. Plus, you can do like for freedom to buff things up into the trade. And this is all under the assumption that they are going. I mean, even if you go first, they still get the front line. But like you have combat engineers, so if at any point you clear the front line, you can start going crazy with that. If the front line ever gets cleared, 35Ts can start coming down and taking value trades into type 93s in the support line. Pathfinders can come out to clear some stuff up. And if they still have the front line by turn 4, that's when like the 5th Rangers start coming down. Or you can like, half-track their infantry back, and then that's just a slight tempo gain. And now you can even run like Crossfire in the deck if you like really want to get funky with it. And I'm completely sold myself on this idea. I'm gonna be grinding frontline the second the expansion drops. I'm not playing any of the new cards.
I mean, I wish I could say that you'll be on your own doing that, but I'm pretty much in the same kind of place. I just want to try it, see if I can make it work. I just cat amongst the pigeons moment. Mostly kidding. 1939? You could just, if columns are worried, you could just knock it down to 0 op cost. That'd be fine, right? In all seriousness, though, I will also say that Bocage Warfare exists, and getting this into the front line with Bocage Warfare on it is a fairly terrifying thought as well. But I am happy, like JKing, I am happy to see this back, if only because it means I can sit for several hours frustrating myself to death, trying to play the nostalgia train. because I miss the days of Frontline, because it was a deck that I have. It's probably outside of Brit Air, the deck I have played most in this game. But yeah, so these are the returning cards. Let's have a look at what's leaving. And warning in advance, this is the section where you are at risk of getting some old man bear rants. Let's start, however, with America at War. So America at War is a 3-cost standard American order, and it says gain an extra credit slot, draw a card if you have 2 or more unspent credits. Okay. I'm never, ever going to be the guy who is sad to see ramp getting tapered, because I've said it endlessly. I personally don't like ramp as a mechanic in a game that is as asymmetrical in nation design as cards is, because ramp is just stupid powerful, because it turns out in a game in which you have limited resources, giving one nation a strong resource generating engine, even if it does require a little bit of tempo loss earlier on in the game, will bring out some stupid stuff. Is this the card that I would want to have seen rotated? No. But they're never going to rotate. It's become very apparent they're never going to rotate the card that I wish they'd rotate. I have been public about this. I am not afraid to say it. Please just rotate War Machine and never bring it back. It is a silly, silly card. This is far less offensive. Sorry, but it is. Anyway, before I get overly ranty, we'll just work down in a straight line. JKing, what do you think about America at War going / ranting bears?
So I think that this is a sign, as you were saying, that they are never ever going to rotate War Machine, which I think is just a poor decision. I'm not saying War Machine should never like be in the game, period, and it should go and never come back. But like they rotated out War Bonds, and then they rotated out Hour of Need, but they brought back War Bonds, and then they rotated out ASW Patrol, but they printed America at War, and now they're rotating America at War. But like but they brought back War Bonds, and it's like everything is changing in what ramp has access to, how much ramp is in the game, and everything is changing with the exception of War Machine in the middle. But what people seem to miss, and by people I mean 1939, is that there were periods of time where the best decks in the game were big ramp decks that ran Hour of Need and War Machines and ASW Patrols. But the vast majority of the uses of ramp is just with 4 War Machines and no other ramp, because just turn 2 War Machine is the best thing you can do on turn 2 for basically every deck other than Japan. Like if you're not playing a deck with just everything has 0 operation cost and you're playing aggro, turn 2, the best thing you can do is War Machine. And that's just never not going to be the case. America at War was an interesting way of having a not turn 2 way to ramp, but that makes it more useful later in the game. Because War Machine could become a very dead card later down. So I'm sad to see a interesting card that required thought to use, that made deck building more interesting, being rotated, while we are left with just the slap 4 copies of War Machine into any deck.
Cool. Grumpy old men have spoken. On you go.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with JKing on this one. This should have been War Machine. I think me and JKing have played enough card games, and we've played enough Hearthstone to know that Wild Growth is not a healthy card to have in any card game.
Nope.
I mean, if you look at Legends, the cheapest form of ramp in Legends was a 3-cost 1/1. So, yeah, like having War Machine and War Bonds in the format, like War Machine is just so good, and US has like no good 2-drops. So War Machine, you're like automatically just playing War Machine anyway. It would have been much more interesting if they had rotated War Machine and War Bonds, and then like brought back, like left America War in the game, and then brought back Hour of Need. So like the 2 ramp cards were like America or Hour of Need. At least then, like, because a big problem I have with War Bonds is it cycles a card. It replaces itself on the following turn. I think there's much more interesting things they can have in the ramp slots. That's not just turn 2 War Machine every single game forever and ever.
Yeah.
Because I'm so tired of playing games where it's like, turn 2 War Machine, turn 3 Crossfire, turn 4 Henschel. That's the game. Yeah, just War Machine being two credits to ramp is it's just unhealthy. It really does need to be gone. And I do agree that America War is like a really interesting card that you can play it early to accelerate, or you can play it in the mid game to cycle a card and accelerate. It was a neat little piece of design, and I'm sad to see it go, especially in lieu of the fact that War Machine will still forever be played in like every deck.
Yeah, pretty much. It's nice to know I'm not alone. I think if you are watching this 1939, this is a fairly collective opinion. I don't know whether you'll ever listen to it, but it just really, oh dear. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
I do say this as someone who, like, I'm not against. I love ramp. Ramp is a cool mechanic. Most of my favorite decks in like card games are ramp-based decks. Magic, I play a lot of green. I play a lot of like Gruul ramp. In Legends, I played a ton of like Ramp Scout and other ramp decks like Ramp Warrior as well, like Ramp Rage Warrior. Ramp is a neat mechanic when done correctly, when it's balanced properly. It's just just having such cheap ramp, and when it's at 4 copies in the deck as well, it wouldn't be nearly as bad if it was like a limited, and you wouldn't be seeing it in every opening hand. But it's just very annoying.
Yeah, I mean, it is just the thing, isn't it? I should also say I also played through my Hearthstone times were when, indeed, it is the same thing. Wild Growth had the same problem. It's just too much value. But I think we've said our piece. I think it's fairly apparent where we stand. I am sad to see you go, America at War, in the sense that you are at least a more interesting way of doing something I don't like, as opposed to just a painfully generic way that everybody's going to keep doing something I don't like. Oh boy, I did not think this through. This is why sometimes I plan these out in advance and space cards out. If your ears are bleeding, I'm sorry. This is Bomber Mafia. This is another card that I have been incredibly vocal about. This is the 4-cost special US order that says, develop a US bomber. Deal 2 damage to all enemy units if you have 5 or more unspent credits. I have a storied hate relationship with this card. But primarily, and I will say this, it's not the card itself that I have traditionally hated. I kind of get it as an interesting-ish idea, but some of the stuff that it has been able to generate while also AoEing 2 damage has just been stupid, and it's been too easy to proc too early. And if you want to know why, just rewind a few minutes and listen to us all over again, because in a world where ramp is not so easily available, this card becomes a lot less offensive. And yes, it's been changed, so now you need to play it on turn 9 versus whatever the hell the last iteration that we had to live through in, and yet still, every single value ramp deck is running it. Hell, I'm running it in Throp because I'm running 4 War Machine. And I feel bad about the fact that that's just a given. I'm not sad to see this go. JKing, any particular parting thoughts for Bomber Mafia?
Yeah, so I actually have a bit of a different thoughts on Bomber Mafia. It's a develop card, so I'm fine with it leaving, because if they want to just remove the develop as a keyword, that's totally cool by me. I don't think that's what they're doing, but, you know, they could. Just throwing that out there into the universe. And obviously Bomber Mafia on release and after the first nerf was still way, way too good. However, since they rotated production order and removed the B24D and the B24J from the pool, since then, I honestly have not had any issue with Bomber Mafia. Like, it's still a very good card. It still sees a lot of play, but I would have been fine with them keeping it in the pool, assuming that they never brought back the B-24, the B-24 brothers. I would have been fine if they kept it with the pool. I also don't have a strong opinion that they remove it. It would be nice for US to have a board clear. It would help US be a main nation possibility for like a slower deck. Because Bomber Mafia was really the only thing you had to clear boards in US main. At least boards that aren't exclusively in the support line. So yeah, I hope they get something that replaces it and doesn't necessarily have a huge value generation tied to it, but just with the pool of bombers that have existed in the game right now, I don't really have a huge problem with the develop pool for spending a card that costs so much and you have to play it so late into the game. Developing like an mediocre bomber off of it's fine. So yeah, I don't have a huge thoughts on this leaving one way or the other.
I mean, in fairness, I will say I probably am coloured by my previous over issue with the existence of the B-24 brothers are a fair point. I suppose it is a lot less problematic now than it has been. Core, where do you fall on the Bomber Mafia spectrum?
I'm a little bit further on the other side of the fence than JKing. I think this card has been actively bad since production order is gone. I have actively cut this from a bunch of ramp decks. I do no longer play this in Throp. I think waiting until you're at 9 credits to have the pleasure of dealing 2 damage to the board is such a stretch when cards like Crossfire exist. Again, I will keep banging that Crossfire drum. Like the fact, like, it's so inefficient, and the bomber pool post production order is so unbelievably bad. 90% of what you see are just 6-cost vanillas. So it's yeah. This is a card I've actively been cutting from slower American decks, from slower ramp decks, from Throp, like since production order got rotated, because there's no point. Like, production order plus this was way too good. The amount of lethality that those 2 cards produced together, because you had the 2 6/5 blitzers out of production order and 2 more from Bomber Mafia 90% of the time, that was way too much burst damage to come out of ramp. But nowadays it's just so bad, and again, it's just so inefficient as well. Like, why ramp to Bomber Mafia when you can just ramp on 2 and play Crossfire?
I mean, that is also fair. I will say, one thing we are all agreed on, I think, is can we have a US board clear that's just a good board clear, please? Like, just nothing fancy. I know we seem to like adding stuff and having it do things in a weird way, but could we just have a good board clear that is just a board? It's not hard to design, surely. It's just find a nice piece of historical art and move on. I do tend to agree. The one thing that will make this super sad for me is if we don't see something to fill that need in US, because I think you are right, both of you, that it's going to be crippling for US if they continue to just not have that answer. Anyway, I know JKing was about to say something as well, but I do feel it was important to add that, yes, need board clear, please, 1939.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say on Core's point, yeah, I think at this point, with the substantially lowered value you're getting out of the average Bomber Mafia, if you're not playing War Bonds, you can't realistically play the card, because you can't play War Machine on 2 and then wait an additional, what is that, 5 turns to play your Bomber Mafia. You're just gonna die before then, and realistically you should be playing a main or ally nation that has better cards.
Yep.
But if you're playing War Bonds, I think.
Yeah. There are ways. Yeah, there are ways that you can accelerate to it, ramp being ramp. But yeah, so that's Bomber Mafia. Next up is Embargo. This is a 2-cost US special order. It is, I mean, again, it's a relatively simple piece of text. The enemy gets 2 fewer credits next turn. It's credit denial. It's a card. I've not really seen it do much of anything, because credit denial hasn't been a thing for a while. Credit denial can be powerful, clearly, because it's denying resources. But I don't know. I guess I'm fine with it leaving. Core?
This is the type of card that supports only two types of decks. That is either hyper aggro or like combo decks. And US is part of pretty much neither. Outside of course, the 1-2-3 Michigan Super Fortress thing. I don't think it's one of those cards that could, in theory, become very, very broken if the correct things have been printed for it. We saw that in Hearthstone with Mana Burn in Demon Hunter, particularly in Wild. A lot of times they would just vomit their hand and then double Mana Burn you, and you just have to pass turn and die. But that's not really the case in cards. Cards is not as binary as Hearthstone, particularly with like things like operation costs and whatnot. This is I don't have the full historic context for this card, but to me this was just unplayable the entire time I've been playing. So
yeah,
JKing.
this card used to be different. I don't even remember what it used to do, but it wasn't played, and then they changed it to this, and it wasn't played. I think it was like enemy units operate for 2 more next turn or something. I don't know. It was some other form of credit tax that never saw play, and yeah, this card sucks. It's good that it sucks, because if this card was really good, I think everyone would be miserable.
It would be part of a miserable deck, let's be fair. Next up we have Firebomb. This is... So, I don't know whether I'm going to be a bit weird with this one. So Firebomb is a 4-cost US order, and it says it's a limited, and it says deal 5 damage to a unit. Excess damage is dealt to random enemies if you have 2 or more unspent credits. So if you play this with 6 credits, it is of course substantially better if you can spread the damage around. It's US single target damage / removal. It does link to ramp, which obviously we all know I'm not the world's biggest fan of, but I don't object to the total existence of. But at the same time, I sort of feel like if US isn't getting some better proactive removal or damage dealing tools back in the new expansion, this isn't necessarily going to be helping, even though I'm not the world's biggest lover of this card. It does do a job that sometimes you're struggling to find outside of your ally. JKing, I know we sometimes think similarly in deck building. I'm just a little concerned that this runs the risk of making US even less good.
Yeah, I was a huge Firebomb believer in that it filled a slot in US that they previously really didn't have any options for. Not that it's like an incredible card, because if you compare it to other stuff, like Tactical Strike is 4 damage, single target for 3, and
Yeah.
that's like already mediocre. This can hit anything, but like Extended Barrage is 2, technically 4 for 6 to anything. Which is better than the straight 4 most of the time. So this is like already worse than that. And it's like, well, if you play this suboptimal damage to cost ratio with 2 extra credits, then if you hit a small thing, you get a random that could potentially kill other small things if you have 6 credits. Firebomb realistically just isn't a great card. But the fact that it saw so much play highlights the fact that there's nothing else that you could like run instead of it for its role in primarily US main decks. We've seen it pop up a little bit in outside of US main. But yeah, it's US needs to get a card from this expansion that is just like a piece of decent removal of like a mid-sized thing. Like the closest thing they have is like Death from Above, and obviously that is not acceptable.
No. Core, how do you feel?
It's a card I frequently don't run. Usually when I'm playing US, Firebomb just doesn't quite make the cut. There's like 2 or 3 other cards I would rather run over it. We were lucky enough that kind of Missouri has kind of taken up that slot for me for the most part in a lot of the decks that I would want Firebomb in, at least US main. It did see a little spike in play with the introduction of Seahawk, just because it was a clean Seahawk answer. But aside from that, like it saw a little spell of play during United Front because it was really good into like Jagro if you were ramping, because you would just target a cavalry regiment and just blow up their board. But yeah, just a card that it's at least for me, it's always just been on the bubble. Like it's like the 42nd or 43rd card for me for US. So it doesn't really affect me one way or the other that now that's rotating.
No, I mean that's fair too. But yeah, just a thought about what might be coming. We can but hope. Oh, hello. We have arrived. This is Furor. This is part of a package that I have been quite outspoken about. So this is the US one-cost limited order that says fully repair a damaged unit, add an outrage to your hand. Outrage is the two-cost US order that says develop a retribution. Retribution is the US order that lets you develop more US orders. I'm going to save my issues with the whole ramp retribution develop madness for a card that actually was more relevant than this, because this was by far the least offending of them, in the sense that no one ever really made a lot of use of it, but it was still part of a package that I'm not a fan of. If anyone's got any specific Furor commentary, ping it in, but I have a feeling we'll be coming back to the retribution thing in a bit.
Yeah, Furor always sucked, and it with the nerf to outrage, this was the one that like got hit the hardest. Yeah, I don't know. It just always sucked.
Yep. Okay, see you, Furor. Hidden plans. It's the covert thing again. This is the US one-cost standard order. It says choose one, draw a covert unit, or reveal a covert unit and give it +1/+1. It was part of the attempt to make covert into a functional package. Pretty safe to say, if you've watched the Soviet video, and if you haven't, you totally should if you're really interested in thoughts on covert, we went in quite depth into what we think about covert and the risk of it becoming an oppressive archetype if it was ever actually good, versus the interest level that you could have in specific covert cards. This would have been part of the former if it was good enough, which thank God it never was, and is totally irrelevant to the latter. I've not got a lot to say about it, but as ever, if anyone does, go for your life.
This card has absolutely beautiful art. This might be one of the most egregious cases of beautiful art on an awful card. This card is another example of just how terribly they phoned in designing the covert cards. Like, this card basically did the exact same thing as pre-buffed covert operations, just slightly better. And then covert operations got buffed and this one didn't. And it remains terrible, because why would you play 1k, draw a card in a unit-based deck? Why would you preemptively, like, I guess you can preemptively reveal your unit to then buff it before it attacks in, like, a weird world where that's necessary. Yeah, this is just an awful card, very boring design. I'm glad it's gone. I wish more covert cards left.
Yeah, I will say, do bring back the art on something else, though, because JKing is right. It is very pretty. Cool.
I mean, in theory, if covert ever became a mainstream deck, this would have been a viable tech card. Like, if you were both playing covert, you can either draw a covert unit from your deck, or you can preemptively reveal your opponent's covert unit to cut off the effect. Like, if they have an Iron Man in the support line, you could just be like, haha, it's now a 5/5, but you don't get to burn me for 7. So, like, there was that. If it didn't give +1/+1, arguably it might have been better as an anti-covert piece of tech, but yeah, it's just a garbage card.
Core gets points for reaching to find something to say about the card, though. Right. Oh, look, it's Mobilization. Right, Mobilization. 2-cost US special order. Pretty simple. It says draw 2 units from your deck, discard them at the end of turn. Some combo decks tried it. I'm kind of done. I don't have a history with this card. I've never really done much with it, and I personally don't rate it.
I think this card was a little bit underrated, actually. 2k draw 2 units is like not bad. Yeah, you discard them at the end of the turn, but if you're an aggressive deck, you don't really care. I tested this out in a couple of decks, primarily in the Japan-US hyper aggro list with 4th Alabama, because you would basically spend the first 3 turns spamming 1-cost 0-up units, and then you would just cycle your deck with Mobilization and Shifting Doctrine to constantly shuffle and redraw Alabamas to kill your opponent. So like it's very, very efficient at what it does. Like it guarantees you 2 units there and then for 2 credits. I just don't think people were. I think people saw the discard them at the end of the turn and just kind of were like, this is unplayable. But I don't think it's as bad as people think it is.
This card is a card that I've looked at so much when building US decks, and I'm like, I just feel like I want a little bit more draw. And I look at Mobilization, I look at the units in my deck, and I think about it, and I think about what the average hit is, and it's like, well, what's the average turn I'm playing Mobilization in? And it's just, you can't play it, like, you can play it in hyper aggro, or you can play it in a deck that has, like, you know, like Betty with some discard synergy stuff or something like that. But there's just no world where you can play it in any type of control deck, because if you just run like, you know, 3 or 4 units that cost like 6 or more, it's like, okay, I play Mobilization and I hit 2 of my bigger cards, and then I'm forced into playing one of those 2 big cards this turn. If I don't want to just completely lose on value, then I'm discarding the other one. And like, I don't know, it's just weak. It also used to be just 5 credits, draw 3, and I've never understood why it was reworked. I think their explanation was they wanted Britain to be the only nation with straight unconditional draw, or like multi-card draw, which, I mean, I don't know how to feel about that, but especially because it's an American card that like used to be fine, and is now not as good. I think pretty clearly. I don't know. Mobilization used to be a card that was played a lot back when it was 5 credits, draw 3, in a wide variety of decks. And Mobilization in this version, I don't think I've ever seen anyone play.
Yeah, seems fair. Right, Mobilization be done. Ooh, it's supply priorities. So supply priorities is a limited US card. It is a 1-cost order. And it has choose 1, deal 1 damage to all units, or fully repair all units. Yes, they are both all units. It can be fiddly. I don't know. I'm kind of fine with this going, although there is a little part of me that's like, once again, this is US losing one of their best answers to a rapid wide deck, while not really having anything to take its place apart from being able to outtrade it. I think I'm more on the fence about wanting to see what's coming for the US than I am worried about what's going. This card has definitely seen chunks of play in different places and at different times, and any time we've seen low health hyper aggro style decks in play, it's been teched into a lot of US decks, even US ally decks. Is it amazing? No, but it sometimes, very much like Firebomb, does a job that it needs to do. What do we think, JKing?
Supply Priorities is a card that I've never been too hot on in US. I see why people play it. Like, I see the draw of like, well, US ramp is really bad into Jagro. This card is really good into Jagro in theory, so I'm going to put it in my deck. I've just never felt like US main ramp had the draw that allowed you to run this card without just like kind of griefing your other matchups. But I've also like been blown out by this card a number of times, so it's certainly like not like awful. You're not trolling by putting this card in your deck. I've just never been too hot on it myself. So in a vacuum, I'm kind of whatever about this card rotating, where it's not seen like a ton of regular play now. I've never played it personally. However, if you just like look at the broader picture, the US package is just losing. Like, they're not losing any cards. Well, that's not true. They're losing one card from like their sort of like, I suppose, tier 1 decks, what you would call their tier 1 decks right now. But they're just losing like a lot of good cards that support tier 2 decks, which is made even more frustrating because they are, I think, I'm pretty undeniably the worst. Well, I suppose Britain, but they at least bottom 2 main nations in the game right now, and they are historically the worst main nation in the game, going back the last like 3 or 4 years. And they are losing a lot of their like interesting cards that you could like put into decks and test around in decks. Whereas like if you look at Japan lost largely pieces of crap, and if you look at Germany, they lost largely pieces of crap. So it's like, why isn't US losing their copious amounts of pieces of crap rather than like they're actually potentially playable cards?
Yeah, Core, I have a feeling you're about to be on much the same page.
Kind of. Supply Priorities is a card I'd never really played in a ramp, but I did play a lot of this in Throp specifically. Because Throp, usually early on in the game you struggle with, because all your units obviously have 3-op costs, so you struggle to like trade blow for blow on board. So Supply Priorities helps you deal with like the early aggression, like the turn 1 Cavalry Regiment, turn 2 Cavalry Regiment plus a Type 93. So Supply Priorities helped you get over the hump of the first couple of turns before you started getting your engine up and running. And then in the mid game, this let you up against other like mid-range decks, let you take big trades and then just repair your units. So it caused big board swings in that sense, that you could take really big value trades and then force your opponent to have to work through all the health again. So yeah, this is primarily, I think, a hit to Throp more than anything else. I'm sad to see it go because it was an interesting card. I think this is more or less getting rotated because it has the word repair on it more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably fair. Yes, by the way, you and I have done the same thing in Throp with this card, because it does in Throp, it has versatility, which is definitely a thing. You can definitely multi-trade out of it. Right, next up, we have Uncle Sam. This is a 4-cost US standard order. It says duplicate a random unit in your hand. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think this is largely a waste of card. It's overcosted, its effect is random and a bit janky, and I don't know, maybe someone else has more to say, but this is, for me, just a piece of US trash that's being tidied up.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked that this card was still in standard. I played against this once in an OCC.
Wow.
Yeah, that happened once. A tournament winning player brought Uncle Sam against me in an OCC. Go look it up. It was bad there. It's bad here. It's bad all points it has ever existed in the game. I don't know. I really hope it comes back one day, because the art and the name is
Yeah, absolutely. It's the kind of card you'd want for the US deck to actually be kind of one that you'd want to play, really. If you're going to have a card in a US deck called Uncle Sam that's a standard, surely you'd want to be bordering on an auto include, as opposed to, confession, I had totally forgotten this was in the standard pool. But yeah, it gone. Speaking of it gone, this is the 103rd Cavalry Recon. This is the US 3-cost, 1-op cost, 3/4 covert infantry. And it is standard, even though it doesn't say it on here. And it has reveal. Your units get +1/+1 if this unit was covert for 2 or more turns. Sure. It's another covert card going. I'm still not quite sure why we're losing bits and bats of covert and not everything. But fine, I don't mind it going, because again, it was just, as we've talked about before, going to be part of the covert super deck if it ever existed, which it didn't.
This, honestly, the fact that they rotated this and not the 394th, which is
Yeah.
the 4-2 that gets +2/+2 in the front line, like this one, no one's ever played with it that I've ever seen. But I don't know. At least there's like a world where you could feasibly like play this in just a regular deck, where you just like kind of try to keep it back for a couple turns and then bring it up to buff like a big board of cards or something. Like it's not good, but at least it's like slightly more interesting and playable than the other covert card. They could have rotated both, and I wouldn't complain. But like, if you're gonna only rotate one of the two, why would you rotate the one that's like slightly more interesting?
Yeah, I think we are, all of us, on a very. I certainly, I know JKing and I are on literally the same hymn sheet with this, which is in many ways it's not just that you're not rotating all of the covert cards; it's that the ones you are rotating. Yeah, I would have inverted. I would have liked if you were going to keep something, you could keep this because, like you say, at least it does something interesting when it flips. Also, it can be quite punishing if your opponent flips it at the wrong time. It's certainly more interesting, as you say, than the other card. Core, fanboy, or just like, again, it's yeah, okay, shaking head quite comfortably there. Yeah, fair. I think it's a thing. So let's move on to an elite. This is Victory March. So I have a lot to say about this. So this is a US 5-cost order. It says set the operation cost of your units to 0. It says gain HQ defense equal to the total cost reduced. The biggest thing I have to say on this is, why are you killing one of my favorite decks that isn't top end or tier 1? This is a high velocity bullet to the back of the head of Throp at a time when it's never really gotten its feet under itself anyway. And might I add, we're reaching a point whereby Throp is not the worst deck to lean into in US if you want to try and outvalue some of the other crap that's out there. I've actually been proactively using Throp on some of my early Field Marshal climb matches just because it's nice to outlast Germany occasionally. It's not often I truly object to a rotation. I don't get this. I'm sure there's, like, I guess if you're bringing in a bunch of stuff that somehow, but then you'd be surely the only things you could be bringing into the game that would make this an egregious problem would be Throp support. So why would you get rid of Throp? Anyway, someone take over, but I'm so lost on this. Core has a sad face, and I know he's a fellow Throp enjoyer.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the biggest hits to Throp, but this also just hits heavy mid-range US decks, like the US Italy Sherman deck. I know JKing enjoyed that deck as well during United Fronts. Incredibly fun deck. But like Victory March is such a neat little card. The amount of health this can generate while also generating a big board tempo swing is it's something that US did actually kind of need in a lot of cases. And then we also like just got back 5th Rangers, and the 5th Rangers into Victory March is a very nice curve, just going 5th Rangers 8 +4/+4 and then Victory March gain 4 health. I have a 0 up 8/8 now, like along with the rest of my board also operating for free. Yeah, this one does not make any sense to me to rotate. I really do not know why they rotated Victory March when they could have rotated like night bombing, or they could have rotated air defense, or like 133rd Iron Man, just anything else.
Yeah, this like Victory March is one like I'm at a loss of words. I'm just looking at the cards they could have rotated. Like, they could have rotated Mayhem. Covert Operations is, like, it's another Covert Operations card. Nobody's playing it. They could have rotated Super Fortress or Pershing. Like, I know, like, it's like, oh, these cards aren't seeing any play, but, there's the Timmies out there who like to play their big cards. But, like, I don't know, the US already has in elites Big Red One, Pershing, Super Fortress, Mayhem, just in standard already. The Timmies don't need all of them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. If they could stop printing all like US elites as Timmy cards and then rotating all of the non-Timmy cards, like I don't know, like arguably Victory March is a kind of like you could run it in a Timmy deck. Like, I don't know, why are we cutting that? And if you wanted to hit Throp, because they're not rotating like any other Throp card, like if they were just rotating a lot of the Throp cards, because it's like one of those like packages they decided to remove, that's one thing, which would be baffling, but they're not doing that. But like, even like the 13th Engineers Battalion, like obviously that's a very critical card in Throp, but at least it's exclusively for Throp, whereas Victory March is just like a very interesting tech card you can run in a variety of different US decks, and it serves a largely irreplaceable role. Yeah, I'm with you guys. Just no words.
Yeah, I low key, I will also say, because I feel it needs to be said, at least from my point of view, from my design background, Victory March is everything I want an elite in a US identity nation to be. It's big, it's brash, it's flashy, it creates a massive tempo swing, but it does it all in an interesting way that makes it a single card in your deck that you're excited to see. It's even got good art. Anyway, I'm not going to rant over it. We've all made our point clear. But yeah, this is collectively 3 baffled faces on your screen, because there are so many better targets to have rotated than this, and my Throp boy been done dirty with this. And yes, it can be used in other decks too, but yeah, I don't get it. It's fine. Moving on to another, clearing my throat, elite that is leaving us. This is Yank. This is a 7-cost. It's a 7-cost order now. I'm not even going to go into the history of this card. This is a 7-cost US Elite order that says your HQ gets this battle the first time you develop each turn. Also, develop a retribution. Is this card ludicrously powerful and insane? Did it see tons of play? Did it warp the meta? Not massively. Loads of people did throw it in their retribution decks because it's extra value on top of your extra value. But it is another card that is synonymous with, I think, the worst part. Like, I have actively said I don't like develop, but I like this version of develop so much less that it almost offends me. I've been very vocal about the fact that I think the whole retribution thing was a bad idea from the start. And then it got even worse because you decided that the retribution pool, for reasons passing my understanding, made sense to include an order that develops 2 more retribution orders and a countermeasure in a package of orders. You can go back and look at my various review videos on this. I'm not sorry to see Yank go. I wouldn't at all be sorry to see develop entirely go, but I'm definitely happy to see as much as possible the back end of retribution now and frankly forevermore, because it's just, I know JKing has made the phone-in design comment, and I'm not known for my hyperbole. I tend to be quite level-headed, but this is as close as I have ever come to being truly, truly angry about 1939 design, because it's ludicrous. Anyway, someone else speak, because the listeners are going to get bored of my voice on this subject.
I'll go next, I suppose. I'm with you that I think develop didn't need to be added to this game, and I think they made some very big mistakes with retribution in the retribution that develops more retribution, so you can just go infinite off of a single outrage. As well as the countermeasure in that package of orders is just a terrible decision. I think Yank is the best designed retribution card, like retribution synergy card, in that, like, I think it is it's expensive, and it's expensive and it doesn't do anything immediately, but long term it can generate you more value if you build your deck around it. I think that is fine. Obviously, it gets problematic with the fact that there's the retribution that develops more retribution, which just lets you continuously proc Yank. I think Yank did not need the nerfs it got. I think they rather just needed to change the retributions. I think Yank having gotten the nerfs is really, really bad, but was really, really incredibly fun to play with. I played so many terrible Yank decks. Anytime I just didn't feel like playing anything serious and just turning my brain off and watching TV while jamming fun card stacks, I would play Yank decks. Some of the most fun I've had in cards in the last 3 years. I'm like a little sad to see it go, but at the same time, if you weren't going to touch the retribution pool any more than you already have, and you're rotating a lot of the other developed cards in the game anyways, which would have made Yank basically impossible to use, I think it's fine.
Core.
This is not a card that I have too much to say about. Primarily, like I wasn't playing at the time where like this retribution ramp deck was super popular or anything. This was well before my time. So the only thing I know Yank for is its occasional inclusion in like US ramp as a way of winning the super late game versus control decks. That's pretty much my entire experience with this card. Is it to sometimes include in slower meta games versus things like Soviet control, for example, because you can just go infinite value on them. So yeah, I'm not caught up to see this card go. I'm not super keen on the variance that it can lead to. I'm also not keen on infinite value. I think value should very much be finite in decks. But yeah, no, I'm not too sad to see this one going.
Yeah, fair. I was quite composed. Right. Oh, here we go. 13th Engineer Battalion. Another US Elite going. This is the 2-cost, 1-op cost, 1/3 smokescreen infantry that says gain an extra credit slot when you deploy a unit with 3 or more operation costs. We hate Throp. Still don't understand why. And the bear is done, because anything else I say is just going to border on pointless ranting.
Yeah. I will say, I immediately after I finished my list of other elites that they could have rotated instead, I proceeded to scroll down and remember that they're also rotating 13th Engineers and Pershing. So I look like a bit of a fool earlier in this video. But as I said back then, I think if you just rotated 13th Engineers Battalion, I think that's fine. Like, I don't see, like, Throp didn't need the nerf, but, like, this card is I dislike this design for Throp much more than Victory Banner or Victory March. Victory March, very good card. Obviously, you want to draw it because it's very good in Throp, but like when you draw it, doesn't immediately win you the game. 13th Engineers is basically just like War Machine, but more RNG because it's a one-of in the deck. But if you draw it on turn 2, you just like snowball ludicrously, and if you draw it later than turn 2, it's absolutely useless because it doesn't even have the operation cost itself, so it doesn't even like trigger your Le Terrible or anything. It's literally just like you play this on turn 2 and your win rate increases 20%, and if you draw this later in the game, it's a dead card.
Yeah, 100%. As a avowed Throp player, I will completely agree with you. I would have been fine to see this go if this was the only thing hitting Throp, because I do actually agree with you. I think it's actually kind of shonky design in that it's too high variance, in that you are correct. If you can get it to stick on turn 2, yeah, your win rate goes up ludicrously. Core, I'm guessing you're going to be in a similar place with this card.
Yeah, pretty much. It's bad card design because, like you said, on turn 2, this basically will win you games by itself, but if it's drawn later, it's so unbelievably bad. But you need to play it in the Throp deck because it affects your win rate so heavily, having it that, like, in your opener, it's that good that it's worth playing the dead card in the late game. Yeah, it's unfortunate that they have decided to remove 3 pieces from Throp. I know some people are not sold on Pershing and Throp. I think Pershing is necessary in Throp personally because it's a big blitz tank, and Throp needs the ways to close games out, and Pershing is one of those ways of doing it. So yeah, I do not understand why they gave us a bunch of Throp support tools like in the last major expansion in the form of Michigan and Moroccans, and then suddenly rip a bunch of tools back out of the deck when it's not doing anything.
I mean, here's hoping maybe we'll see some new tools. I don't know, but currently I'm a little salty. Okie dokie. This is the 142nd Infantry Regiment. This is another US standard card that is leaving us. This is a 2-cost, 1-op cost, 2/3 Blitz Infantry that has, when this unit destroys an enemy unit, your HQ gains +2 defense. I've played around with this card. I don't super rate it. I don't super rate or not rate it, but I also kind of super don't see this as a major targeted standard card to get rid of. Because it's nice in draft, although granted draft is a different pool nowadays. And again, this is kind of a good card for newer players with limited collections who just want something that they can play on the board that might get them some decent value. I'm kind of baffled as to why it's going. I'm not necessarily angry that it's going, just confused.
I'm
I
a
am
little
angry.
angry it's going.
Yeah.
I'll let you go first, Core.
Again, I, as you know, I am the biggest frontal defense believer in the world. They have ripped every single card that synergizes with frontal defense. All I have left is Thunderbolt. I am so upset. Because when United Fronts came out, one of the first decks I played was US Poland frontal defense, just garbage pile as I called it. It was 142nd, it was Thunderbolt, I was playing Zaza divisions, I just wanted to like endlessly frontal defense my opponent. Infantry 142nd against Jagro just healed you for 17, Thunderbolt
Yeah.
do you 6 cards.
Oh god.
So yeah, all we have left in the game now, the synergizes with frontal defense right now, is Thunderbolt. They took away the OT 34 last rotation. They're taking away my artillery gun. They're taking away my 142nds. I'm so upset.
And JKing.
So, what upsets me about this is the second best 2-cost card that USA has for a control deck, or specifically a card to play on turn 2 or turn 2/3.
Yeah.
That US has. Now, obviously, the first one is War Machine, which is miles better than this. But if you just look through what 2-cost cards USA has, there's some which are like deck specific, like Le Terrible or the 13th Engineers Battalion for Throp, or like Wildcat if you're playing like a Brewster's thing, or 22nd Marines if you're playing a Navy thing. But if you're just playing like a regular control deck, and you just want a good 2-cost card to fight for the board, something like Brionsk Regiment or 845th Rifles, or something like that, or like the Bergman that Germany has. This was the only card that even came close to be like, this card needed to be just like buffed a little, and then you rotate War Machine, and then give US some other good like control tools. Don't rotate Firebomb. Don't rotate Victory March. And then like maybe you're looking at potentially a tier 2 US control deck. And instead, we are losing the second best and arguably only other like remotely playable card as a 2-drop for US control. And yeah, there's like We Can Do It is now the only other, like, healing card left in US, I believe.
Yep.
No, they still have Gunship Mission.
Oh, yes. I never count that. But yes, it's a fair point. It does heal you.
Yeah, I don't know. 142nd was not great in its current form. Like, it probably could use the 2/4 buff if you want to go crazy with it, or just make it heal 3 if it kills something. But, it was playable, and now it is gone.
Yep. Good takeaway if you are looking at this and you're thinking about building a US deck, make sure your allies got decent 2-drops. Yeah, I am kind of sad. Apparently I was the less ranty. Okie dokie. This is the 146th Infantry Regiment. This is the 1-cost 0-op 1/1 Blitz standard US infantry that has destruction. Give a random friendly unit +1/+1. I could say lots in and out about this card and design and some other stuff. I really could. But what I will say is that unless US at this point is getting some really good stuff in the new expansion, thus far, US is taking some big slaps for being... Honestly, I would argue that it's less good than Britain, because Britain's at least got air, and I will die on the hill that if you're a good pilot, you can still do decently in the meta on Brit Air. But outside of my personal points of view, it's still in the bottom 2 decks in the game. Oh god, why? Why do we need to remove this? Someone help me.
So 164th is actually a card that, like, in a vacuum, I'm totally fine with this being removed. And honestly, like, I'm still kind of fine with it being removed, because it's played in a very different deck than all of the other cards we've been complaining about US losing. Like, you're not playing it in the same deck as Firebomb, you're not playing it in the same deck as Victory March, or its supply priorities, generally speaking. You're not playing in Throp. And, US more aggressive, more, like, tempo-oriented decks have been improving. They recently got back Chocolate Boys, Red Devil, Skytrain, Halftrack are all coming back, and those all support a more, like, mid-range tempo build of US. So I think it's fine for US to lose a staple from that archetype, since it's the only card from that archetype they're really losing. So, like, fine seeing 164th gone. It's the fact that they also just, like, this is now kind of their only playable archetype, and they're losing one of their best cards for it that makes it more problematic. But in general, I'm kind of fine with this card scene disappearing. And as just a fun, quick history tidbit, this card got released without Blitz, and then got the Give It Blitz treatment.
Fair. Cool. How I know you are a fellow lover of the 164th.
Yeah, this is, I think, the single most impactful hit in, like, this entire... Honestly, given this entire rotation, this might be the single biggest hit to any given deck, is the loss of 164th to, like, any US tempo and aggro deck. Oh, this thing, you guys were talking about Red Devils, this thing is my Red Devils.
I mean, I can't...
164th... Yeah, its ability to just get into the front line on turn 1 and just make trades really, really awkward. It mucks Crossfire. It just, it's such a good card. I'm gonna be so upset to see this go. This has been, I think, one of, like, the earliest aggro crafts I made in US was 164th, and I have never regretted crafting these things. Oh, I'm just really upset to see this go. I have very fond memories with this card. I've played it a ton, and it has been one of the most impactful cards in the decks that it's been in. So yeah, very upset with this one.
Yeah, I think it is fair to say that this is very much a collective viewpoint, not an individual viewpoint, in that this is about how this is going as a whole patch. But yeah, 164th be gone. Oh, what? Huh? I'm sorry, I'm taking a minute. This is the 37mm M1 AA gun. It's a limited 1-3 Blitz artillery. When this unit attacks, reset the attack of the defending unit. I vaguely remember this card existing. I think primarily because it's an artillery with Blitz, which probably means I've tried to cook with it at some point. We've got a lot to get through, so if anyone has anything to say, go for it, but I kind of have nothing to say
All
on
I'll
this
say
card.
is, this is the crap we were doing before Suppress got released as a mechanic.
Yep, that's fair.
Nobody actually played this card, but...
Okay. Next up, we have the 4th Marines. This is the standard 3-cost, 4-op cost, 6/6 Blitz US Infantry, which did occasionally make it into some Throp decks, because it is 3-op or more, and it is a big body, and it is a standard card, especially if you have a limited collection. It's really useful for filling out an attempt at a Throp deck. You hit Throp, you're hitting Throp. Point taken. Stop it now. But anyway, beyond that, I'm not super angry that this is going. It's fine, I guess, but I sort of hope we're going to see some new 3-op units. Anyone got anything to add to a relatively vanilla Throp unit?
I was probably, like, the #1 4th Marines believer. When Throp first became, like, an actually playable deck a few expansions back, I running 3 or 4 4th Marines with I think 4 Land of the Free. And I know most people, like, weren't doing that stuff, but I was basically like, your deck is so slow you need to run Land of for the free, and if you're running Land of the Free, you should just be running Fourth Marines. But obviously, Throp has fallen off the map a little bit, and even if I were to be playing Throp, I wouldn't be playing Fourth Marines anymore, because Throp got better tools, and then Fifth Rangers came back, and
Yeah.
I mean Fifth Rangers doesn't even really stuff, but you know, you just have better things to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fifth Rangers gives you like a turn 4 proactive thing you can do, even though it doesn't necessarily trigger your Throp stuff. Which again, they need to fix how that card works. It's written as a deployment. It should just be choose one on the card. It's because it also doesn't work with air escort, even though it should technically. But yeah, Fourth Marines has been replaced by Fifth Rangers, and it got replaced by the French 3-drop 4/4 guard as well when that got released, which is just better in general. So yeah, just it hasn't really been worth running unless you're running like a really aggressive version with the 2-cost 1/3 cavalry dudes and like bolster.
Yeah, like I said, my main advice for this is if you've got a limited collection and you're trying to fill out Throp. But yeah, it gone. Blue and grey. I'm going to try and keep this one brief because, God, this conversation's been done to death at this point, and I think we've made our point. Blue and grey is another part of the Retribution package. This is the 6-cost, 2-op cost, 6/6 special unit that says when a friendly unit, including this, is destroyed, add Outrage to your hand. Does exactly what it says on the tin, continues to generate value-generating value generators that generate value generators.
So when Blue and Gray first came out, and for the brief, for the first like probably like 12 months of Outrage being in the game and people doing Yank decks and develop stuff, I was not I was a Blue and Gray hater. Not that I thought the card was bad. It was just that like I'd consistently play into decks that were like heavy enough and had enough value generation to beat any control deck, and then they would also just play Blue and Gray in the deck for no reason. And it really frustrated me. It was like the Timmy's go-to card to make their deck even heavier. And that really annoyed me. But in the last like 4 months, I've actually started to use Blue and Gray in very like attempting to be proactive US control decks that run like a lot of early game units to just fight through board and to stop taking a ton of damage, and then you use Blue and Gray as your sort of value generation without any of the late game that US typically has. And like the primary thing I was doing that with was like a US Soviet deck where I ran like Colms to fight through board early and just stop damage early. But then later in the game, you just like slam a Blue and Gray and trade off a couple of Colms for Outrage into Retribution as the win condition. So I really like Blue and Gray in that type of deck, but I'm fine seeing it go. But this brings me to the point of every single Retribution generating card is gone out of the 4 that existed, except for 121st Infantry Regiment. Why wouldn't you just rotate all of them? Like, if you think that cards that read when you draw a card deal damage to the enemy HQ is too complicated for new players because there's so many different effects in the game, you're going to keep a card that says destruction add outrage, and then the outrage is develop retribution. And like a new player is going to look at this with none of the other develop cards, none of the other outrage or the retribution cards, and they're going to be like, "What the hell does this do?" And
it is true. If viewers see me disappear from the screen, I just need to go and sort something out. But keep talking about this because I know Core's got his piece to say. I will be right back, but we are still recording.
Yeah, I mean that's basically all I had to say about Blue and Gray and 121st. I'll throw it to you, but.
Yeah, I mean, I have played a little bit of Blue and Gray. I played it at the start of United Fronts in a very silly US Poland deck. Basically, this was before the Yulan buff. So you just play it with Denuda and Yulan because the Yulan will blow itself up eventually anyway. Plus the Denuda tokens blow themselves at the end of the turn. So you just generate outrages that way, which was just a nice little value engine for the deck. Yeah, other than that, I don't think I've really played with Blue and Gray in like the traditional ramp decks that it was seeing play in. But yeah, I'm okay with seeing this go Retribution as a whole. I'm okay with seeing go, and yeah, again with the 5/4 not being rotated, very typical. Like it could have been like rotated instead of 142nd or 164th, but no, we're left with a single outrage card. Also, supply priorities, they've rotated supply. The only repair card left in US is Field Hospital, a card that sees no play. So I don't know who's in charge of doing these rotation lists, but they really need to like get it together a little bit because they're all over the place.
Maybe
I
they want
mean-
us to run Field Hospital as a replacement for Mobilization.
Oh dear God!
So I
no.
will add. I will add. Did you know that blue and gray is only one of 6 cards with parentheses in it?
Well, we do now, don't we, Core? We learned that the hard way. Thank you, JKing. I love the reach. But yeah, no, I am 100% with you on why the hell the last piece is still there. But it is, and I guess we'll live with it. It's Pershing. I will read the card, and then we'll probably mostly move on, because we've kind of talked about this. Pershing is leaving us. It is the 10 cost, 3 op cost, 8/8 Blitz Heavy Armor 2 Elite US tank. It has, while in the front line, your HQ cannot be reduced below 1 defense. I do actually agree with Core. Currently, it is kind of a requirement in Throp, even though it's an awkward cuss, and I personally don't like it. And I've even been testing the changed 3-op gigantic bomber, but it still feels like I want Pershing in there. And now it's going, and once again, it's clear that we have sent a message, and that's fine, but I sort of, I don't know. I'm also a little bit sad to see it go, because Pershing is one of those cards that is sort of a rite of passage. At some point, somewhere, everybody has to live through the pain of, why the hell won't my opponent die? Oh, crap, Pershing. But yeah, I am kind of sad to see this go, because I have done some ever so slightly troll-like things with this, just when I've been having fun too, because there are a number of things you can do with this that will irritate your opponent. But yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a sad day, and again, I think there are other things you could maybe have hit, but we've kind of covered that, unless anyone else has got anything to add.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna miss Pershing. I never played it. I never thought it was particularly good. My one thing I'll say is a bit of trivia. Pershing does not stop fatigue damage for some reason.
Indeed, I learned that one the hard way.
I am gonna miss playing Mayhem on turn 4 and cheating this into the front line. That is something I will heavily miss.
I've had that deck. I've had that win. It is a fun feeling. So that's Pershing. Next up, we have the P40K. This is a special US fighter. It's 3 cost, 2 op cost, 3/3, and says when a friendly bomber is destroyed, destroy random enemy units. I'm not sure I even knew this card existed until I was going over the rotation patch, which, yeah, kind of covers my thoughts on the card. Anyone?
Yeah, this is an interesting card that just never really saw play. I think it came out at the same time as Helldivers, and I think the idea was to have just like a constant spam of small bombers and then P40K to punish your opponent for trading out your small bombers, but P40K is so small that they could just trade out P40K first. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting card that just never got support.
Yeah, I think the 2-op is probably the real death knell of this card. It's just so expensive to operate it. Very good in draft, though, as it turns out.
Yeah, I can kind of say that. But yeah, it's an interesting idea. When I read the text and was like, what the hell is this? When I was going over this, I was like, actually, this is quite an interesting idea. Never went anywhere, but it's an interesting idea. And last, and I'm not going to say not least, because we've sort of done the covert thing. It is the final US elite that is leaving us, and the final US card that is leaving us. This is the Deuce. This is the 1 cost, 2 op cost, 2/2 infantry. Sorry, it's not an elite, it's limited, but anyway. And this is the, I suppose, intended to be super covert engine from the US. because it says your covert units cost 1 less to deploy. So anyone who doesn't know, all covert units cost 3. Otherwise, covert as designed wouldn't work anyway, because there'd be no not knowing which one was which, is if you could keep track of the thing. So this basically means that you could deploy them for 2, and it was tried when covert first landed as an accelerant, because in theory, if you're going for that deck, being able to do it 1 cheaper is a thing, but my fondest memory of this card, legitimately, is the amount of times I have just wiped it off the face of the earth the minute it's hit the board during people's attempt to make covert work, and then watched it be a couple of turns before I dropped a bomber because, yes, I'm an air player, and then they just surrendered. Which also sort of summarised what happened to covert for me. But anyway, that's your bear trivia for the evening. That's about as memorable as the Deuce gets for me. I never particularly was the Deuce believer, so I never really did much with it.
I think the Deuce made US the necessary ally for Soviet main covert until the covert operations change happened to make that like an actually playable card. I think the Deuce is once again is just the most like phoned in card design ever. They're like, oh, we covert units are all 3 cost by just, I mean, not really by necessity, but by self-inflicted necessity. So how do we, and we decide that to make a covert deck, we just want you to play a lot of covert cards. So you need to play a lot of 3 cost units. What is the best way to help support a deck that requires you to play a bunch of 3 cost units? Well, let's make a 1 cost unit that reduces the cost by 1 so you can play it on turn 2. Yeah, this is boring game design. It's also bad game design. I am a huge, huge, huge detractor of cards that cost very, very little, and that give you a credit advantage if your opponent cannot remove them early. Because we had an awful meta in the game with Geberg's Pioneer, which was the old 1/1 that at the start of your turn gain an extra credit. That card sucked because if you went first, your opponent almost certainly couldn't remove it on turn 1, and if you went second, they almost certainly could remove it on turn 1. So you either got just a permanent credit advantage over your opponent on turn 2, because you went first, or you didn't. And thankfully, covert was bad, so Deuce never was particularly good. So its biggest impact was making Skytrain worse. But yeah, I think it was boring game design, awful game design. And now it's gone, and hopefully it never comes back.
Yep, it's fair. I will say, by the way, I was also a card-carrying member of the Geberg's Pioneer Hate Club. For the elucidated reasons. Core, the Deuce, thoughts?
No. Covert is a mechanic I never really engaged with, so...
Yeah, it's fair.